how do we fight that war, which is basically the information war this time? Did we think we won that?
Well, see, the information war, just as the regular, military operations, is also fought on two fronts. You fight an information war against the adversary, but you're also trying to shape the narratives that are produced at home and are disseminated abroad, and so on. And whatever the Pakistani sort of narrative in terms of what they managed to do, I think there is enough evidence to suggest that the Indians did manage to get their hits quite right. And I think, as our Marshal Matheshwaran pointed out, while in Balakot there was perhaps some question mark about what exactly was accomplished, this time around, from the very get-go, we had enough sort of images and videos, etc., to back up what exactly we had done. There were reports that some Indian aircrafts were lost in the very first opening stages of the strike. The government of India has not confirmed or denied those particular claims. And I think the Chief of Air Operations quite rightly said that in war you should expect losses. I mean, I don't think it is a one-sided kind of a situation in most cases. It is also perhaps possible that the Pakistanis managed to land a strike or two close to some of our air bases around day 2 or day 3. But it is, I think, fair to say that there has been no significant damage done. Whereas our retaliation to them, which is what was those hit against the 9 strikes that you were talking about, which Air Marshal described as an attempt at demonstrating escalation dominance, clearly seems to have done damage. And, our BrahMos kind of missiles proved their capability, and it's an indigenously developed system. And I think that was the moment when the Pakistanis really started talking about nuclear command authority, etc., in order to catalyze external intervention. So as I see it, that is the sequence of events. So as I see it, the Indian strategic plan was to inflict significant levels of damage and punishment on the Pakistanis and draw a new red line.
The general consensus, Srinath Raghavan, is that Pakistan has, after many years, brought Kashmir back into the into the center place, and basically it's now going to be the sort of the whip that they're going to use to get the world to, I don't know what they want out of it exactly. What do they want India to do, basically? Because, I mean, India's abrogation of 370, Article 370, has created a union territory out of, and integrated Kashmir into the Indian Union. And for all, it looks very likely that probably India will restore statehood in the coming months and years to come, which will give the Kashmiris a sense of belonging to India. What has Pakistan attempted? What was Pakistan's point in giving Kashmir this, this megaphone diplomacy, so to speak? What did they try to achieve?
So obviously, see, the Pakistani position on Kashmir is a very old one. Even recently, the army chief kind of reiterated the centrality of Kashmir to Pakistani identity, etc. Right? I mean, and this is a dispute that's been going on for as long as these two nations have practically existed in their modern forms. Now, did this crisis sort of internationalize the Kashmir question? I think yes, it definitely brought the Kashmir issue back to the forefront at a time when, please recall that there are many crises happening. I mean, even in our
That's right.
in West Asia, there are all kinds of things kicking off. So, to that extent, yes. I mean, did it gather more attention diplomatically from world capitals, from various things? Yes, certainly it did. Does that mean that the Kashmir issue is now going to be the most burning problem for the rest of the world to kind of focus on when it comes to dealing with India? I do not believe so, because there was a time when a lot of pressure could be brought to bear on both India and Pakistan, particularly on India, to talk with Pakistan over Kashmir, etc. But those days are frankly behind us. I mean, it's very much the ball is within the sort of court of the government of India to decide at what pace it wants to do those talks. And frankly, it has been so for a while now. I mean, I think
No, it was really a pointless exercise, wasn't it? I mean, to try and internationalize Kashmir and expect, was there another point? Was it a ploy to bring the US back into the Pakistan game, so to speak?
No, I think, see, we have to make a distinction between what happened during the crisis and what Pakistan wants to do politically, right? I think within the crisis, and here I think I have a slightly different reading from what Bharat is saying. because I do believe that the Pakistani strategy in any such crisis will be to kind of threaten faster escalation towards the nuclear sort of domain, precisely because that's where India has escalation dominance. As long as things are in the conventional domain, we can sort of match them level for level and do better than them, right? I mean, that's where our conventional superiority and capabilities, the fact that we are a larger economy, we can, get better technological systems, our operational readiness is better, etc. So at some point, once the Pakistanis believed that they had kind of imposed some costs on India, then the logical point for them was to sort of, catalyze external intervention. And they have done that in the past. See, again, this is nothing new, right? I mean, so I think, I wouldn't think of it as, the Pakistanis running scared and calling for intervention, as much as that I would imagine that was pretty much part of their playbook. And that we should expect that that is part of their playbook. And we should accordingly have diplomatic options to deal with it, right? Now, to your broader question on, internationalization of Kashmir, etc., as I said, I do not believe that is going to happen. I know that the United States, the president has said, Secretary of State has said that India and Pakistan should kind of get together and talk about Kashmir, etc. Part of India's position is that, there is nothing to talk about beyond the return of POK. Now, again, I do believe that, putting ourselves into a situation where we do not use diplomacy as another toolkit in our sort of attempts to deal with Pakistan is perhaps, depriving ourselves of certain kinds of things that we have. Because I do believe that diplomacy should not be treated as something that is given as a reward for Pakistan's good behavior.
Remember, Nawaz Sharif was sort of thrown out by Musharraf. I mean, there was a coup.
No, see, certainly a problem of civil-military relations in Pakistan, which goes back to the late 1950s. The military plays a preponderant role in this thing. But I think when it comes to serious conflicts, especially crises with India, wars, etc., you would find that their entire political and military system is integrated. The political system may well be, and my own reading is that this is one of the weakest governments that Pakistan has seen in terms of civilian governments. So it stands to reason that, they will align themselves more closely with the military in dealing with this situation. Also, Neena, I think it's important to point out that this is the first crisis and conflict in a while that has actually targeted, or where civilian populations on either side have been affected beyond the state of Jammu and Kashmir. We've seen sort of air raid precautions happening on the India side. There have been some sort of news of, casualties, civilian casualties, etc. on the Pakistani side.
Nawaz Sharif was sort of thrown out by Musharraf. I mean, there was a coup.
No, see, certainly a problem of civil-military relations in Pakistan, which goes back to the late 1950s. The military plays a preponderant role in this thing. But I think when it comes to serious conflicts, especially crises with India, wars, etc., you would find that their entire political and military system is integrated. The political system may well be, and my own reading is that this is one of the weakest governments that Pakistan has seen in terms of civilian governments. So it stands to reason that, they will align themselves more closely with the military in dealing with this situation. Also, Neena, I think it's important to point out that this is the first crisis and conflict in a while that has actually targeted, or where civilian populations on either side have been affected beyond the state of Jammu and Kashmir. We've seen sort of air raid precautions happening on the India side. There have been some sort of news of, casualties, civilian casualties, etc. on the Pakistani side. But certainly a city like Lahore, which is a major city, has experienced what it can be to be within the domain of, strike from Indian military, etc. I think all of that means that you should expect the political and the military situation, establishments to coalesce more, even if the political establishment remains subordinate to the military's prerogatives.
The China-Pakistan alliance is very, very strong, and China they've conducted military exercises, I hear, together over the last couple of years. But also the fact that China is now pushing India on various points. I mean, it's renamed Arunachal Pradesh's towns all over again. And it's now, I hear from Pakistani sources that China wants to extend the CPEC and to have a CPEC 2, which will then also require, will also be illegal because it could go very close to Siachen. Which is something that India has refused to give up, even though they've been pressured to give up Siachen time and time again by the Americans and over the years. How do you see this panning out? Because it's not just China also, it's also because Russia, which is one of our closest allies, is depending more and more on China as the war Ukraine war continues.
So maybe let's start with the question of what the China-Pakistan kind of relationship looks like in the light of the current crisis and where we are going, right? I mean, so on the one hand, the Chinese obviously condemned the act of terrorism, but they also sort of, gave a little bit of cover to Pakistan in the UN Security Council by making sure that the whatever statement was issued did not actually name the group which was based in Pakistan, which had carried out these attacks. So there is still that kind of a diplomatic kind of cover and insurance that China seems capable of providing to Pakistan in situations like this. Now we know for a fact that at least based on what reports we have, some of which are not only Pakistani reports, that the Pakistanis have used Chinese origin systems, aircrafts, missiles, etc. And I think even our PIB report talks about some of those, missile parts being recovered in India, etc. And it does look like, it's not just technology, but operational concepts. Again, Air Marshal Matheswaran might be able to tell us better. We'll have to see how we assess what the Pakistani performance is. And I don't think we should take an entirely one-sided view of these things. I think a more balanced professional assessment will be made of what those capabilities are.
Either way, Srinath, go back to my question, isn't Pakistan a convenient proxy for China to keep India on edge?
That was always the case, right? I mean, since 1962, the China-Pakistan relationship has developed, partly because Chinese have found Pakistan to be a useful counterweight against India within the context of the subcontinent itself, and that has always been there. But I think going forward, the China-Pakistan relationship will face new kinds of questions. Because I feel that with the new doctrine that the government of India has publicly avowed, now that every act of terrorism will be deemed an act of war, which is to say that it is a state-led act of violence against India, and that it will invite retaliation. Now that puts Pakistan in a bit of a corner. So I would imagine that the Pakistanis will now seek greater strategic reassurance. But at the same time, we should not expect that the Chinese will provide that kind of thing. As Air Marshal Matheswaran was saying, even with technology, countries tend to be somewhat guarded. And again, I mean, we should perhaps study things like the China-North Korea relationship a little bit more closely, right? I mean, nothing is open-ended, but we should expect that there will be a little bit of calibration going forward, because the Pakistanis now need more strategic reassurance in this domain, right? And what that does mean for our sort of military plans, etc., is something that we need to think hard about. On the Russia thing, again, Neena, it is true that the Russians today, in the wake of the Ukraine conflict, which has been going on for a while, have become economically and even in certain cases technologically more kind of reliant on China and the Chinese system. But I think it is in India's interest to not overstate that dependence.